Perfect. All right, we'll kick off. So the first thing to jump into is Gooeys is still going ahead as planned, but we are going to be compressing the whitelist time down a little bit. Rather than the whitelisting starting for, say, internal Dogira team members on, I believe we're looking at the 11th, we're going to start that on. We're compressing all of the whitelisting down into around about 1 week. So on March 21st, we're going to be kicking off with the Dogira team and the Dogira community team. This wasn't made fully clear on the last AMA we did, but just to reiterate it, the Dogira community team will be receiving their Gooeys mints completely for free. We're going to be gifting them from the contract itself, so Matic payments will not be required from the community team. And obviously that's a thanks from all of the Dogira team for the massive amount of work that the community has put in getting the word out about Dogira, speaking to people about it, etc. So next up from that one then, on March the 22nd, we're going to have verified holders. Those are holders which are verified on Discord. And we're also going to have wallets within the top 100. And they will all be whitelisted to be able to mint one Gooey without any additional input needed. With the wallets inside the top 100, this may be extended out slightly over the upcoming days, depending on how much demand that we see from otherwise. We would recommend that if you're looking to get a definite minting spot, to jump onto our Discord and get yourself signed in as a verified holder. You only need about 10,000 Dogira to be able to verify yourself on our Discord. The verified wallet addresses are all obviously kept completely private. Your security is sanctimount in those kind of cases. So next up, we're going to be looking at a couple of partners, a couple of potential collaborators, and we'll be allowing them to whitelist themselves. These will typically be teams that we found that are within NFT community spaces and would typically have good community engagement and interaction, would have, I suppose, places within the actual gaming community and general long-term holders that we want to see arriving in on the project for the long term on it. We do know that, I suppose, doing very scattered whitelist approaches can result in a lot of people just looking to get in and get that spot for a quick flip. And obviously, in a highly speculative market, that is typically to be expected. There is a decent amount of that. But we are looking to bring on projects that, I suppose, are more inclined to stick around long-term with their holders and to actually get decent involvement in the actual project itself. So we are being quite selective on the packs that we do take on board with that. However, if anybody in the community does know of any NFT projects who are looking to reach out in that kind of sense and build any collaboration between teams, do feel free to get in touch with our team here while we're reaching out to a couple of others on the side as well. So on the fourth one then, we're going to be, as stated on step number 2 with the wallets in the top 100, we're going to expand that out then to cover a decent bit more of the community. So as we've noted, some people just prefer not to be in a verified holders club, and that's all fair and fine. So we're going to make sure that they will be able to get a Gooey minted through the Dogira panel themselves to jump in on the action with that. On the 25th then, we will move on to the public mint, in which case it is open to everyone. Now, we will be still limiting that to 1 per wallet up through the public mint, and this will only be up to 1,000 NFTs, as we've noted. Any additional NFTs that are created following that will all have to be through the tumbling process, which is how you breed new Gooeys, taking 2 Gooeys and being able to share their stats or possibly have mutations run into the mix as well on it to get something completely new and different. And then those will be the Gooeys that need to be picked up from that point going forward. And typically we expect to see most of those on OpenSea, which is the main platform that we'll be supporting with that. Obviously, you will be able to do private transfers through wallets, etc. But as always, we do recommend going through an intermediary system such as OpenSea when doing this, just to make sure that you get exactly what you're handing over any potential tokens for. Along with the housekeeping then, we also have a new website going up live. You might have noticed that there have been small updates made to Dogira.finance. There'll be a couple of more updates to be made on that, particularly in reflecting the new whitelist process that we have set up for Gooeys on it, condensing that all into 1 week. The Dogira.net homepage will also be getting updated. That update will go live later on tonight. We've been working on that over the last week or two. And we do recognize that the Dogira.net homepage we have at the moment, while I do believe it did very well serve its purpose for while we were setting up Dogira initially and getting, I suppose, our direction in order on it, what we're looking at to do with it now really, I suppose, is to emphasize the products that we have built rather than what we were building. So our new homepage will show off our NFT kit, it shows off Dogira.finance, and obviously it shows off what we have upcoming for Gooeys on it. And of course, our staff list is updated to reflect the fact that we do have a new managing marketing director in Caroline, who is on the Twitter Spaces with us now. So for jumping into the questions, it is a little bit different this time around. We've obviously moved over onto Twitter Spaces. You can still put questions through on the Discord if that's where you are. You can tweet them or DM them to Dogira Official, and I believe you can also put them into our Telegram channel. I am not 100% certain on this next part, so Skylar, you might jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can also send them through on Twitch, I believe. Are we up and running on there, or is that not streaming this week?
We are streaming on Twitch as well.
Perfect. We have
just
every avenue then.
Yeah. So keep in mind that the audio is a little bit worse off on Twitch than it is on the Twitter Spaces itself. So if you don't mind, you can jump on Twitch. But if you want to have the best audio quality, definitely Twitter Spaces is the way to go with this.
Yeah. And again, moving forward, we are going to be using Twitter Spaces to run our AMAs. We do recognize, obviously, that we've got a lot less people on this one than we normally have on Discord. So we hope if you know anybody who did join us on our AMAs on Discord or elsewhere, that you give them a shout to jump on to the Twitter Spaces just to, I suppose, show a bit more face on here. So I think we're down around 1/3 or 1/4 of what we normally see. But again, we're moving over to a new platform to run these on. It is expected to see a little bit of a drop, so we'll hopefully see that pick back up over the next couple of weeks in AMAs that we run, particularly with the launch of Gooeys coming up. And I believe that is the most part of the housekeeping on my end. I know we have a couple of small other things that we're going to be launching out with. I suppose one additional thing we wanted to speak about on this is in regards to the actual Gooeys launch itself. While we are keeping the actual play to earn launch on April the 1st going ahead with it, it does need to be clarified at this point that we are considering what goes up live to be a full version in terms of the actual contract itself, as again, the security safety on that side is extremely important for us. But we're considering it to be a beta in as far as the actual client goes. That's the front end on it. That graphically and aesthetically, it may not be up to, I suppose, the full standard that we'd like to get it to, but we would like to get this released and begin working on, I suppose, the aesthetics of it in the background. We'll also be adding new features as we go along as well. We're building the actual contract itself so that all the core stuff is in the main NFT contract. So as we're noting, you know, if you're going to be, say, leasing one of your Gooeys out or lending it to somebody, or the actual tumbling process for breeding two Gooeys, that will all be in the actual NFT contract itself. But additional features that we introduce over that time, then we'll be able to put all of that into additional contracts that you may be able to interact with via your Gooey, and so on and so forth. We will be keeping it away from actual centralized systems, but we will be launching additional contracts to add on functionality to what we kind of see it growing into as, you know, the more fuller product as we develop from it then. But aesthetically, like I've said, it is quite a low priority right now in how the actual client is presented in terms of, I suppose, graphical prowess. Like we've noted, this is a game that's going to be able to run in the browser and on mobile. So there obviously have to be a couple of sacrifices made there to begin with. We can't really overload devices with it. We have to ensure that, particularly with play to earn games that do have, I suppose, a decent amount of following in developing countries, we want to make sure that this is something that is accessible and available for all through those devices. But similarly, again, the actual quality that we have coming out of it will increase over time as we go through the iterative development and release process with it. And I believe that is all of the general housekeeping we have. That's Elijah, Skylar, Caroline. Is there anything I'm missing from there?
No, I think you're all good.
Anyone? Oh, one thing. We are doing that liquidity rebalance. We've been the liquidity rewards rebalance, not the actual liquidity rebalance. That is to say, as we've been noting all week, we are going to be changing the actual reward emissions that are coming out of our current staking contracts. This will be based off the amount of volume that we see actually coming through the exchanges. You do not need to break your LP. You do not need to unstake from the LP farm, but you do need to harvest your rewards. If you don't harvest the rewards that you currently have in your contract, then they may be lowered if it is rebalanced to be at a lower amount. So please do make sure that you get those harvested. And if you want to switch over to another liquidity pool, then after that is rebalanced, you'll be able to do so without any potential losses of tokens. In the case where any token emissions may be increased, it is possible that a different contract will be launched on that one, as we may have users who have not done any harvest through their account, and if we were to increase it without ensuring that everybody is harvested from it, it may emit a significant amount of rewards, which would be unintentional from our side. So we will, as always, give a ping tomorrow when we're starting the process, and we'll give a ping when we're finished on the process as well, making sure you're able to restake back in. We'll also be looking at the long-term contract staking, which has been requested for quite a while now. But we'll get all of this sorted tomorrow and give a ping when everything is updated on it. But as noted, if you have rewards that are outstanding on any of the contracts that are currently running, we recommend harvesting them as soon as possible. The Hanzo pool will not be affected by this. And that, I believe, is all of our major housekeeping. So I think we're about ready to jump in to answer a couple of questions. And as noted, if you're new jumping into this, questions can be in regards directly to Dogira, or we can speak in general about crypto play to earn or the NFT industries in general.
All right. Well, let's kick it off with our first question. This one is, will founders' NFTs for Gooeys have anything unique or special about them that distinguish them from subsequent generations?
Yeah, so that was something that we did take a look at while building it. And I suppose really the only thing that will be different on them is that the ID will be 1000 or under. We don't want to create a system whereby there's going to be a significant amount of value in just simply holding and doing nothing. We want people to actually be experimenting with their Gooeys, tumbling in new ones, stuff like that. I mean, as we've noted, we're going to have a token attached to this as well. And with us allowing people to be able to tumble in new Gooeys and stuff like that, the only way that the supply can continue to grow is if users are actually interacting with the game itself. So we don't want to disincentivize older Gooeys or anything like that, but similarly at the same time, we want to incentivize creating new Gooeys going forward from there. If there is, a sentimental hold or anything like that, that's fantastic. But similarly, we would want to make sure that people are kind of incentivized towards tumbling in new Gooeys, keeping the supply growing and allowing more people to actually join the game. As if we stopped on day one and, that was just it, those are the best Gooeys that are going out, then the reality is we would only have 1000 players that would ever join us. And hopefully we grow a lot larger than that. But we might look towards doing just a very small little graphical bonus on the actual image, something along those lines. So I will keep you updated on that one. But as far as an actual in-game advantage goes, or stats advantage, we don't want to see anything like that coming in the first batch.
Great. Next question. I'm basically going to ask all the Gooeys related questions first, since that's kind of what most of the intro has been about here.
No
will people be able to buy Gooeys NFTs with Dogira tokens?
So right now, no. It is something that we are looking at further down the line on it, where you might be able to do some, say, the tumbling process through it. For the actual purchase itself, we will be doing, so in order to actually tie it to the Dogira token, we will be doing a burn pool through a portion of the Matic that is raised from the sales that we do on it. And then, we might set up further burn pools then from any royalties through, say, the secondary markets such as OpenSea, etc. Right now, we don't have any direct plans to allow for purchases directly with Dogira, but we might be looking at adding in some actual in-game components, features, etc., that you might be able to pick up either through holding Dogira or through spending it directly. So there will be a direct link between Dogira and Gooeys, but in launching the Gooeys project itself, we want to make sure again that there is enough of a stand aside from Dogira so that it is not a 100% direct link on it, but we do want it to, I suppose, hold a little bit of exposure to it. So the quickest way to allow that in a safe fashion is, of course, to take a portion of the sales that we take in Matic, set up a Matic staking pool, and charge a small amount of Dogira to be burned as you're joining that pool. So essentially you get rewards in Matic and you burn a little bit of Dogira to get into that, allowing for, I suppose, an overall kind of lift in Dogira in that we're lowering the actual supply of it. So that's what we're looking at with a lot of the titles that we build. As if we kind of consider, we're launching a token that comes along with this as well. And the token will be used for, you can get it from in-game rewards. You can use it then to say, breed in new Gooeys through the tumbling process, etc. That is going to have to be an inflationary token. And the reality is we have to plan what's essentially a completely new economy around that. We wouldn't be able to do that with Dogira directly because Dogira is not an inflationary token. There is no way to add new Dogira to the supply. You can only take Dogira out of the supply. So it's kind of important that we keep a lot of that functionality separate, nearly even for game design reasons. Like as much as, I can see the argument of why we would want to take in Dogira because, if there's a great amount of spend going in it, a great amount of Dogira goes through circulation, potentially getting burned, etc. At that point, then we're kind of tied into just having one title is the reality. Like, let's say, the Dogira supply was decreased by 40 or 50% or anything like that. So we'd see the current prices that we have today doubled. The issue is when we launch another game, and with that game, then, we basically taken a deflationary token and we've used it for an inflationary purpose. And if we have another game, which, very likely would also need an inflationary token on top of it, that's when issues start coming in as the supply really starts to dry up. The reality is the only way for us to be able to launch games like that would be to buy the tokens up off the market ourselves, which, as fantastic as it would be to be able to do that, so I'm sure you can understand purchasing tokens directly from a market to fund an entire game, you would be looking at 7 or 8 digit spend, which unfortunately right now is not within our reach. And if we were to half the supply, it would be even less than our reach. So the goal with Dogira is to make sure that there are tangible links between every title that we build, but we don't want Dogira directly exposed to a game economy. Dogira is designed to kind of be more of, as we said before, the gold standard on it. That value will be gained from the titles that we develop. And similarly, there'll be a little bit of de-risking on it as well. As again, to kind of run back on, looking at inflationary versus deflationary tokens. If we did have a title go live and, it didn't perform to expectations or anything like that, then the impact on Dogira at that point would thankfully be lessened greatly, due to the fact that it is not being used for any, in-game purposes. It's not being staked out as any rewards through, in-game missions or quests or anything like that. Similarly as well, if we were to look at absolute worst case scenarios, if there was, any bug in the contract or anything like that, if we had that running on a completely standalone token, we would be able to, recover from that. We'd be able to pull liquidity from that token. We'd be able to, fund in anything additional that we needed on top of it to replace any potential losses, stuff like that, where possible. And that's a lot easier than looking at a very established token such as Dogira, which is currently on a V2 after our near total redesign that we went through over the summer months and prior to that. So yeah, there's a decent few reasons as to why we're not going down the route on that. I'd recommend maybe our white paper does kind of run through stuff like that. And I'd recommend kind of even getting kind of a discussion going on it, as we would love to hear kind of the community's opinions and having the multiple ecosystems running at one time, just to get a little bit more input on that on our side. But sorry, bit of a long-winded answer to a relatively short question, but I hope that clears it up.
No, I think that definitely does. I think kind of hand in hand with that, at least a little bit. Will people be able to play Gooeys without a Gooey NFT? I know you had mentioned like a lending or borrowing system. So if you wanted to expand on that at all to kind of help people understand if like they can't mint now, can they still play, all that stuff?
Yeah, so the lending system would allow you to be able to play with them. See, the actual launch that we have lined up on it, we're assuming that the Gooeys that are going out on day one will be essentially replaced by better Gooeys as developed through the Tumblr system that we have running on it. Those Gooeys then, in our own designs and our own minds anyway, should be going for a decent bit cheaper at that stage. Then older Gooeys should start making their way onto the market. There is a balancing act in that. We don't want to see the value go down drastically at the same time. We want people to be able to jump on and actually be able to use that play to earn system in a way to, we don't want you on every day to need to keep up with a certain value that things are running for. If you take, a week away from playing Gooeys or anything like that, you shouldn't be coming back to zero or anything of that effect. You should be able to play it casually. But over time, slowly, the price of old Gooeys should begin coming down, which would allow you to jump in at a much cheaper rate on that. See, with the first question that was asked on the Founders Edition, that is something that is one of the reasons why we're kind of looking at, doing something graphical that we'd update on it. We don't want to go against the core design philosophy of making a very overpowered mint or anything like that. But to be able to have that small little graphical addition, or just something to signify that, you were one of the first holders, or even a generational ticker or anything like that could be quite easily added into it. I think that's the kind of stuff that, we want to kind of remain on old Gooeys and stuff like that. That there will be a reason to generally hold it. There will be, any sentimental value where you just want to kind of keep one of the first ones yourself. But ideally, we would see more Gooeys come into the actual system. We'd see people being able to breed and tumble more Gooeys over time. And that will essentially bring the general entry price down as time goes on, while ensuring that people who are playing and who are holding, aren't looking at, say, a mega inflationary supply that's cutting into, essentially, if they buy in for 100 Matic and 3 weeks later it was only possible to earn, 30 Matic or anything like that, that would obviously be a core problem with our design. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we kind of have those systems in place, where we want to see more Gooeys come in, the ability to maintain multiple Gooeys, but similarly have the individual price of Gooeys come down over time, is to ease that entry barrier off a little bit and allow more people to get in when they can. So if you're not able to get in on the original whitelist day one, there will be obviously the tumbling and breeding processes available immediately. So there should be additional supply that's actually hitting onto the market from that. Now, while it is additional supply, we do have to note that this is starting off at, a total limit of 1,000 on the supply. So it is possible that, we might see the actual asking price on these, particularly on rare ones. If somebody gets a couple of rare stats or high attributes or anything like that, we could see the market decide that, a higher price is actually in order for these particular NFTs, stuff like that. It is important to us that people are able to get in and start playing it. And I think that the breeding process, that while we might see a little bit of volatility in the market in deciding on what the fair value is for that. Similarly, a lot of what we look at on this from our side is more around actual, game design on it. It's very difficult for us to be able to state that this should always be, this amount of Matic or anything like that. We've kind of given our guideline on it in what we're launching with. But moving forward from there, then it is designed in a fashion that it should be easier to get a place in it as time goes on. But the lending system is available up until that point, but I suppose there is a small level of exclusivity that would come from being a day one holder or an early holder of it.
Great, thank you for unpacking all of that. Next question is more about the future of Gooeys. Are there plans to implement any sort of marketplace like there is in Axie Infinity?
Yeah, so right now we're relying on the intermediary systems such as, running through OpenSea. And I mean, being frank on that right now, all we really see from OpenSea is, that 2.5% fee that needs to be paid onto themselves. There have been issues over the last while where people had believed that, there were exploits on OpenSea and stuff like that. Now, I've spoken about that on my own Twitter before, that every bit of research that's been done into it has shown that what was claimed to be exploits was unfortunately user error. Like, we had some people that seemed to click on phishing emails. Now, this is still being investigated and more info might come from this, but to date, it looks like this was all through phishing emails, or, an earlier one, which I looked into myself to get a resolution on how it was happening, was when people were, instead of paying the cancellation fee on an NFT, they were sending it to another wallet and then sending it back to their own wallet. So the front end, said, well, they don't own that anymore, so I'm cancelling it. And, well, not cancelling it, they're delisting it. But the contract would fail whenever we're trying to, if you try to buy something that someone doesn't have, the contract will come back and simply fail. But they sent the NFT back to themselves, meaning that they still weren't showing up on the front page, but the contract now could see the NFT was belonging to that person again. So there were people, I believe, that had Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs, and they bought into them at 0.1 ETH and stuff like that, and they transferred it to another wallet, transferred it back, I know they'd obviously shot up in price around 70 or 80 ether. And of course, somebody noticed that the contract is able to actually interact with that. So they logged in and they were able to put through a purchase for their original asking price. Now, OpenSea, to their credit, they actually reimbursed everybody who was caught by that, even though the issue had kind of extended from somebody trying to trick a smart contract, which, I mean, it's if you don't know what you're doing, like, to a great detail, never try to trick a smart contract is a very short bit of advice that will do you well for life. But from what we've seen so far, it is a good, secure system which has had no history of actual exploits running through it. When we're launching our own kind of systems for that, you know, if we wanted to cut out that 2.5%, I mean, number one is that there's a security concern that we have to run with on that. We have to make sure that we have the same level of security, and similarly that we have the level of liquidity that might be needed if a problem is found. I mean, as I've said, credit due to OpenSea, they reimbursed people who really tried to trick a smart contract. It certainly wasn't an exploit, but they did reimburse them in the end. And ideally, that is, I mean, if I was in charge of OpenSea, that is something that I would have approved as well. It's something that I would like to have on our end as a safety net on top of that. So you do have to look at funding for audits, funding for potential reimbursements if needed. You need to look at the actual development of the front end platform itself. And of course, there is the exposure that OpenSea has as well. If we were to do, if we were to do well on our first day with Gooeys, and we're seeing lots of them getting minted, lots of new players arriving in, that would have us trending on OpenSea, which would in turn bring in more people onto it as well, increasing the player base and increasing the interest that we see in it. So definitely a good idea to try and have something, in game itself. I would love to get something actually hooked in game so that you can browse OpenSea while in game through, say, a more Gooeys-like UI and stuff like that. But for running our own NFT platform itself and handling those kind of contracts, we're already looking at, having the leasing system in there, and that's a lot easier because, we're not transferring the actual ownership of an item. We're lending an item through something. There'll be a level of control that'll be on that. That's much easier to secure when it comes to actually being able to do the more direct stuff through it, as in actually selling straight through it and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot more to kind of consider on that one, which right now I really think our kind of development pool would be much better placed into expanding on Gooeys as an actual gaming experience and expanding on the other platforms we have then as well. So yeah, I would say it'll be pretty much all OpenSea or other supported platforms going forward. But again, it would be great to have a UI in game to allow for, I suppose, more seamless interaction.
Oh, right. Let's see. Do Andy and Dylan, so the Jupiter Lighthouse guys, do they have any involvement with Gooeys? Would they be involved with Gooeys in the future? I can at least answer that first part. No, Gooeys is, an internal Dogira project. Andy and Dylan are still working on Humaniquarium. But Owen, do you think that they might have a role to play in the future?
Yeah, I mean, never say never. We haven't discussed anything on that, as obviously they're very busy working on Jupiter Lighthouse and on Humaniquarium to get, we're bringing that up for launch in the future as well. So for the time being, they certainly have the plates very full. But I mean, as the future goes on, I mean, who knows what people will be working on at that point, or if we have, kind of I don't want to say cross-contamination projects, but essentially we might see a little bit of bleed between the teams at some point in the future. I mean, again, nothing is kind of been discussed or spoken on it, but it's certainly, never say never on it. We are working together as, I suppose, a more cohesive team when it comes to the blockchain stuff. So, I mean, there's always opportunities for us to work together more in the future.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put that. There's another question that I can also answer. Will there be any sort of Gooeys X Humaniquarium kind of crossover stuff? That's something we could definitely talk about. We haven't talked about it yet because we both just had our heads down in the dev process right now. But perhaps in the future, it's something that we would obviously bring up. I know Andy and Dylan are both very enthusiastic whenever we bring up new ideas about, what we could add to games and whatnot. So that's something that we can definitely maybe have on the table for a later date once both games are very polished and ready to go. Let's see. This is a departure now from Gooeys talk. Somebody asked, it looks like Munch is getting close to finishing up their fiat on-ramp. Are we planning on implementing that into the Dogira websites? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've obviously spoken about Munch before, and we spoke to the community about that. We're still speaking with Munch at the moment. We still have a line of contact with them. So if there are any kind of updates on that, if we're going to be implementing any direct fiat on ramp or anything from there, we'll certainly get the community updated on it as soon as possible. Right now, obviously, a lot of the work that we're doing on the dev side is very deeply in game development. We're kind of on top of one release, and then we have Humaniquarium, which is going to continue ramping up in the background then for its potential release date. But that is all stuff that we are still looking at with a high sense of importance. We do want to make it easier to onboard onto Dogira. We found in particular, Polygon is getting excellent adoption, which is fantastic. It's still kind of confusing some people on getting on board with it. And obviously we've made resources available through our YouTube. We have our Discord, we have our Telegram, we have centralized exchanges that we're operating on. Recently, we expanded onto MEXC. And the reality is that the more we're able to expand out in those areas, the better. The easier it is to onboard, the better. And the reality is that the easiest way to onboard to anything is to be able to buy it directly. So it's something that we are certainly still following up on. And we'll be able to update the community when we have, I suppose, more succinct news on that.
Great. This one might fall more into Caroline's wheelhouse, but when are we getting Gooeys and Dogira merch for everyone, not just for the merch packs that we're putting together for Gooeys follower milestones?
Yeah, Caroline, mic is over to you.
Cool. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Well, I make up some dates. No. So so absolutely, we're going to trial run the merch first of all with our roadmap campaign that we're currently running. So once we get to 3,000, we will be giving away some merch packs then, and I guess we want to get the merch in first here and see it and tangibly hold it and make sure we're happy with it, make sure Mary is happy with how the artwork turns out. And I guess from there, then we'll probably put a plan in place as to when we get it up and on the website. But for now, we want to get it in first and make sure that we're happy with the product before we would send it out to you guys.
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff we can do with that as well. Like if we look at the actual in-game stuff, like any particular top lists or competitions and stuff like that, I think giving away merch is one of the best things that really any kind of crypto game can do right now, because there's so much disconnection that we find between crypto gaming and actual gaming, the established gaming industry, that if you play, there's pretty much any game you can think of that's been released in the last couple of years, they've generally had merch, and often they come through kind of giveaways and stuff like that. So yeah, this is something that definitely we're all interested in taking a look at. But right now, I think the important part for us is getting, I suppose, flying the kite, the trial period out of the door, and seeing, how does it look, and do people like it, if there's a good demand for it beyond that. Yeah,
I think that's fairly, that's very reasonable for merch at this time. So this last question that I have, for the top 100 holders, do they need to actually unstake from the pools in order to qualify for that early mint, or are we able to see how many tokens they have, even if it's staked?
Yeah, we can't see the exact amount that anybody has staked in it. So similar to how we do DAO snapshots and stuff like that, we would give 1 week heads up to pop out, well, a 4-day minimum heads up to pop out a staking pool, so we'd be able to take a snapshot on that.
All right, well, great. Last question that I have, are we at all working on a third game? Yeah,
so said beforehand that I am eager to bring over Splitter Steel from Steam and make a version of it that would integrate either with either with Dogira directly or would integrate with its own currency, stuff like that. This is one of the few titles that we've kind of been looking at where Dogira would be usable in it, because this isn't a case where we need to inflate tokens or anything like that. The tokens would need to be provided by players, and there would just be a circular supply on that then. If we were to go down the route of having its own token in it, that would allow us to do the more classic style of gameplay that you see at the moment. So if you look at Splitter Steel, it has a lot of stuff for passively generating coins in game and stuff like that. Obviously, we can't do that in the case of having, you know, a non-inflationary token on there, particularly Dogira, which, you know, we'd have to provide the actual liquidity on to begin with. Similarly, though, Splitter Steel is hyperinflationary, and that's why I was taking a look at that when it kind of came to putting it into, say, a crypto title or having any type of ecosystem running on that. The token supply would go through the roof. I believe Splitter Steel started off with, what is it? I think every new player starts, well, they start with 0, but their first game, I believe, at launch, before we kind of upped the rates of it, I think it was 1,000 coins you got from the first round in it, and then it went up from there. But we saw from day 1 to day 7, essentially the coin supply that we had in game went up by a couple of million times. It was absolutely gigantic. In Splitter Steel, that's obviously not that big a problem at all, because it's just a progression system and that's it. But when it comes into crypto, there's kind of a large question that needs to be asked on that one. It's, you know, obviously game design, as we've always said, is something that will come first on everything. And my issue is that I believe that the game design on that side of Splitter Steel, on my part, was poor. This was originally designed and developed, you know, in like a 1 or 2 week period, where, being honest, I was only looking at, you know, the core part of it itself. I wanted to have an engine that could, you know, matchmake people. I wanted them to be able to interact with each other. I want them both to be able to submit a command, you know, either split or steal, and not have it seen in advance. So that required that this all had to run through a dedicated server. If we were to move that over onto blockchain, you know, there's a lot of kind of questions that come from it again. Do we leave that on a black box server? Do we use it all on chain at that point and just, you know, send through public and private keys that are able to be used, you know, decrypt every game result and stuff like that? And will there be a central authority on it, which will have to have the keys sent to it? And what happens if the keys don't get sent to it? Will there need to be a backup system? You know, somebody could simply switch off their machine, say, right, well, I'm not giving it the keys because I think they stole from me. There's a lot of questions in moving that over. And when it comes to, as I said, the game design of it itself, it is something that I think was kind of a problem in it, that once the game did take off and got a lot more attention than I assumed it would get. You remember that I was kind of planning for maybe a couple of dozen people, maybe 100 or 2 to play it. And then I went on Steam and we've got well over, I think, 150,000 accounts signed up for it in total then. And adding on new features was kind of more about getting the features in there and designing the game around them then. Like, the economy kind of just went more inflationary with every feature that was added to it. Like, the base building system was designed and developed, I think, in the course of, I think that was 3 weeks in total. And that was like the entire passive portion of the game. And once I found that people were able to actually, you know, reach the peak of that so quickly, because, you know, the math wasn't really done in advance to say, you know, how quick will they get there? And I completely underestimated how long people were playing it every day. They reached the end of that content in about 2 months, I think. And I estimated it would last about 6. So from there, we had to add in a lot more progression systems. And of course, because people had reached that point so quickly to begin with, and they were giving bonuses to all of their teammates or their organization members, etc., it was going quicker and quicker, and it was just snowballing into it. So what I think it does work fine in the state it's kind of in right now, in that, like, you know, there's nothing on chain. Yes, there's hyperinflation, but it's kind of more a case of who cares, because, you know, it was just kind of set up that we're able to offer things that were able to be picked up in game with that hyperinflation. So yeah, it's there's a lot of questions that kind of come into it and how we put it across. Like, ideally, I would like to see it using Dogira tokens and also have some kind of passive element in it as well. And that's a difficult one to approach. So right now we're designing on Gooeys. That is a fresh design that is looking, it knows the fact that we're going to have things on chain with this, and that people may look to trade those things as well. So we have all the kind of important things in mind with it. For Dogira, again, it's difficult. If you want to have for Dogira, for Splitter Steel to use Dogira, it's difficult. And it's also difficult when we look at taking the current hyperinflationary supply. As the reality is, while we can scream and shout the warnings from the rooftops that this is the most hyperinflationary supply you'll ever see, I would not trust everybody to read into it. And they might find out in essentially one of the worst ways possible, that they'll wake up the next day and find out that the supply has increased by a couple of thousand times. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of have to look through when it comes to that. I suppose it's kind of going back on stuff that I spoke about previously as well. Like when we look at doing actual game design, we want to try and keep it in game design and not purely in economics design. But this is one of those cases, as I said, where I think the economic design is flawed. And similarly, we do have to pay some level of respect to the fact that things are on chain as well. That's not to say that I'm against ever making a game that would have a use for a hyperinflationary supply, but I think the hyperinflationary supply that we see in Splitter Steel is more as a result of very rushed game design and something that needs to have another look taken at it. Another small thing then to add in on it is I licensed all of the assets that are used in Splitter Steel, so there could be some legal ramifications if we were to say NFTize a couple of those, like say the player models and things like that. So it's something that kind of has to be looked into on if, do we have to do up our own player models on this? Is there an extended license available? Is it covered under the existing licensing that I have? There's a lot in it. So right now we're looking at doing Gooeys, and that's obviously being built with all of our own assets. We're designing it from the ground up. We know where it's going to go from there, and it's a much easier job to kind of get our first title pushed out the door with it. I'm certainly going to go back and have a look at Splitter Steel once we do have that launched though. And I imagine that we will be seeing an iteration of it at some point in the future, but I just can't give any definite timeframes on it right now. Yeah, so if that's all the questions we have, I think we've got about 9 minutes left. So if anybody has any burning questions that they want to throw into Discord, on Twitch, into our Telegram, etc., if somebody wants to buy their own O-ball, you'll have to ask Mary. She has the exclusive rights on that one. But outside of that, yeah, I'm just doing a quick scan through. I'm seeing there was a question in regards to verifying without using Collabland, that you're skeptical about connecting the wallet that you're unfamiliar with. So when you verify through Collabland, it is through a signature. You don't actually connect to it or give it any access to control any of your assets at all. It's simply a signature that you verify. So Collabland will be very safe in that regard. Obviously, make sure that you're clicking on the link that is in our Discord and under Collabland Join. As you know yourself, phishing within the crypto industry has taken on a life of its own in recent times. So just make sure that you're clicking the link that's under Collabland Join, and it will simply ask you to verify a signature. It should never ask you to connect or allow access to any of your tokens. And obviously, nothing will ever ask you for your seed phrase or otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah, always pay attention to whatever the pop-ups are asking you. Don't just blindly click through it. Now, I think we have some whitelist spots to give away. Caroline, do you want to take that away?
We do. So for each AMA from now through to the launch, we will be giving away guaranteed whitelist spots to some of our Lucky Live listeners. So apologies to those in the US who are in work at the moment and couldn't get online. But this week's winners are Tark Razor, Static Wolf 6, and Chris Crypto Nomad. I hope I've pronounced all those right.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, as Caroline said, we're going to be giving out more of these until Gooeys is launched. And of course, when we do get Gooeys launched, we might try and give away a few in-game items and possibly, free mint or something like that in the future. But definitely do keep tuning in, spread the word about it. As I've said, this is our first time moving over onto Twitter Spaces, and hopefully it all went smooth. It seems to have gone well, but we obviously have decent bit less on the actual followers on here than we would have on Discord, which we've ran our AMAs through about 6 months now, if not a little bit more. So yeah, we're going to probably see a little bit of time it needs to kind of get us moved over onto Twitter Spaces and get the same following on here as we would have had on Discord. But do spread the word about it. Please do share it when the Dogira channel shares it out. And hopefully we'll be able to move these numbers over to here. And I mean, the great thing about Twitter Spaces is that we can see people actually finding us on here. And typically that's why we were saying at the start of it, if you want to chat general NFTs, if you want to just have a chat about the industry as it stands right now, and obviously it's been a tumultuous couple of weeks for crypto in general, that we're totally open to chatting with the community about that sort of stuff too. All right, I think that's everything, unless any last questions have come in.
There wasn't this last one. I did just answer it, but it was, is the Dogira NFT kit a proprietary service?
Yeah, and I see, yeah, it was answered, yes. So it was made from scratch. And yes, it is not on demand. You do have to get approval through ourselves, depending on what you want it for. And if you want to do an actual launch through ourselves directly through Dogira.finance, which we've hooked up to be directly integrated with minting through it and stuff like that. As I said, we're doing a website update, and that website update will contain a little bit more information on the NFT kit itself and who can be contacted in order to use the actual services provided by it. As time goes on, we may look towards doing an actual public release of it, where you will be able to use it in a plug and play style fashion. But right now, I think that the NFT ecosystem itself may suffer from it. That we've seen a lot of rug pulls in the NFT world lately, and one thing that we're able to do when running through Dogira.finance is we're able to KYC people that work with us. We're able to verify who they are. We're able to, take some level of control over how funding is put through it and stuff like that. We're able to, in short, make sure that the entry barrier being lowered isn't resulting in rug pulls being more easily pulled off. So we're able to kind of provide a level of security on that at the moment. I imagine that as the market proceeds on, we're going to see much more kind of generic tools come out, which will allow people to kind of run those kind of services. We're hoping that we'll be able to provide some level of security on everything that runs through Dogira. So I wouldn't put it as a definite that we're going to, make this plug and play thing ready just because other people are doing it. We would like to have some way of being able to secure actual traders and stuff like that. But that they're like, from a technological standpoint, it is ready for plug and play usage, but it's a decision that we have made so far to not allow for that as of yet.
All right. Well, I'm going to do one more quick scan real quick across the community channels, but it is looking like we are out of questions. And I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a million all. And yeah, we'll see you again in 2 weeks. So once again, it'll be on Twitter Spaces. And we're going to have the actual recordings of these go up a little bit easier now that we've got that a little bit better streamlined. So if you're listening to this on Monday or Tuesday, you'll know that we got that working as intended. Thanks a million all.
Bye, everyone. Happy weekend.
Thanks, guys. See ya. Bye, everyone.